more than 2 decades. Katie Esvald has fans all over the world. It all stems from her love of all things 18th century. And meet Vanessa Renwick. She's known for her highly experimental independent films.
Join us Thursday at 8 p.m. Stein Oil Company, fueling for businesses in Clackamas, Oregon City, Milwaukee, and Tualatin.
The Oregon Community Foundation, where Oregonians share a passion to improve their state, helping to create charitable funds for the causes you care about. OregonCF.org.
Good evening, I'm Gwen Eiffel. On the NewsHour this Tuesday, our lead story, President Obama declares he sees glimmers of hope on the economic horizon. The other news of the day, protesters stand down in Thailand. Walking away from the six-party talks, North Korea ratchets up its nuclear threats. Jeffrey Brown looks at banks and bailouts. Spencer Michaels on the economics of solar energy. And Islamic law in Pakistan. A report from the Swat Valley. Judy Woodruff gets reaction.
Major funding for the NewsHour with Jim Lehrer is provided by
oil, energy, the environment. Where are the answers? This isn't a liberal or conservative issue. It's a human issue. As an energy company, Chevron has a great responsibility. So we've improved our own energy efficiency 27% since 1992. And now we ask you to join us in one of the most important efforts of our time. Using less. Will you join us? Chevron, human energy.
Intel, supporting math and science education for tomorrow's innovators. And by Grant Thornton.
The William and Flora Hewlett Foundation, working to solve social and environmental problems at home and around the world.
And with the ongoing support of these institutions and foundations. And
this program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Our lead story, the latest look at the economy was disappointing today, with retail sales weaker than expected. The report came as President Obama talked of signs of progress, but cautioned it will be slow. NewsHour correspondent Kwame Holman has our report.
The numbers from the nation's retailers were a setback to hopes for an early economic recovery. For March, the Commerce Department reported retail sales were down 1.1%. Consumers spent less on a whole range of goods, from electronics and appliances, down nearly 6%, to cars, down more than 2%, to clothing, which fell 1.8%. The sales figures were watched closely by economists because consumer spending accounts for 70% of the U.S. economy. President Obama took note of that fact in what aides billed as a major economic address at Washington's Georgetown University. He cited consumer spending woes in defending his stimulus program.
If every family in America, if every business in America cuts back all at once, then no one is spending any money, which means there are no customers, which means there are more layoffs, which means that the economy gets even worse. That's why the government has to step in and temporarily boost spending in order to stimulate demand. That's exactly what we're doing right now.
More broadly, Mr. Obama expressed some optimism about the overall economic outlook, but his remarks were tempered.
There's no doubt that times are still tough. By no means are we out of the woods just yet. But from where we stand, for the very first time, we're beginning to see glimmers of hope. And beyond that, way off in the distance, we can see a vision of an America's future that is far different than our troubled economic past.
A short time later, Federal Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke took the same theme at Morehouse College in Atlanta.
Recently, we have seen tentative signs that the sharp decline in economic activity may be slowing. To be sure, we will not have a sustainable recovery without a stabilization of our financial system and our credit markets. We are making progress on that front as well, and the Federal Reserve is committed to working to restore financial stability as a necessary step toward full economic recovery.
The president also touched on the need for financial stability in his speech, but he defended his decision not to nationalize banks outright.
The reason we have not taken this step has nothing to do with any ideological or political judgment we've made about government involvement in banks. It's certainly not because of any concern we have for the management and shareholders whose actions helped to cause this mess. Rather, it's because we believe that preemptive government takeovers are likely to end up costing taxpayers even more in the end, and because it's more likely to undermine than create confidence.
Goldman Sachs, which took financial rescue funds, reported strong first quarter earnings late Monday. Today, it sold $5 billion worth of stock in order to pay the government back.
In other news today, Wall Street slumped on the news of sagging retail sales. The Dow Jones Industrial Average lost 137 points to close at 79.20. The Nasdaq fell 27 points to close at 16.25. Somali pirates have seized 4 more ships since Sunday. That's when U.S. forces killed 3 pirates and rescued an American ship captain, Richard Phillips. The pirates had vowed to retaliate. Today, maritime officials confirmed the new seizures in the Gulf of Aden. They included a Lebanese cargo ship, a Greek-owned bulk carrier, and 2 Egyptian fishing boats. More than 60 crew members were taken hostage. Anti-government demonstrations in Bangkok have ended, at least for the time being. Protest leaders called them off after days of fierce clashes that left 2 people dead and more than 120 hurt. We have a report from John Ray of Independent Television News.
Thailand has teetered on the brink of mob rule. Another bus hijacked and torched as troops face demonstrators who have brought mayhem to the streets of Bangkok. Bullets and casings, evidence of spiraling violence and raw emotion.
You have to help us. Our government, it's really bad.
But this was their last stand. The red shirts, who vowed to bring down a government, were instead outnumbered by security forces.
What we are seeing here are protesters beginning to make their way home. They are surrounded by heavily armed troops and riot police, and although the mood is still defiant, hundreds have decided that today is not the day to stand and fight.
Some left claiming victory, but they have failed in their aim to bring back from exile the former Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawatra. His supporters were led through army lines, each photographed by police. The street protests cleared, the street party could begin. This is the Thai New Year, but this tourist economy is counting the cost of crisis in empty bar seats and visitors who've stayed away. For now, order has been restored and even the troops can relax, but this nation is as divided as ever.
Police issued arrest warrants for 14 of the protest leaders, including the ousted prime minister. Former Cuban President Fidel Castro today welcomed a U.S. decision to allow Cuban Americans more contact with the island nation. In a statement, he called it positive, although minimal. Monday, President Obama lifted restrictions on family travel to Cuba and on money being sent back to relatives there. A broader trade embargo remains intact. An American journalist accused of spying in Iran has now been tried behind closed doors. A spokesman for Iran's court system confirmed Roxana Saberi had her one-day trial on Monday. He said a verdict will come in 2 to 3 weeks. In Washington, State Department spokesman Robert Wood demanded Saberi be released.
The charges, as have been reported, we maintain are baseless, without foundation. We remain committed to trying to secure her release. That's all I have. I will keep you abreast as we are able to, obtain more information about the case.
Saberi has dual American-Iranian citizenship. She was initially jailed in January on charges of working without press credentials. A man accused of being a Nazi death camp guard, John Demjanjuk, will not be deported to Germany just yet. A federal appeals court in Cincinnati delayed the move this afternoon. Earlier, immigration officers removed the retired auto worker from his home in suburban Cleveland. He was taken out in a wheelchair as his wife looked on, weeping. Demjanjuk is 89 years old. He came to the U.S. after World War II. Former Illinois Governor Rod Blagojevich pleaded not guilty to federal corruption charges today. The former governor is accused of wire fraud, conspiracy, and trying to auction the Senate seat once held by Barack Obama. Blagojevich spoke to reporters as he arrived for his court appearance in Chicago. He insisted he's innocent.
I know what the truth is as it concerns me. I'm glad that this day has started because now we can begin the process of getting the truth out, and I can clear my name and vindicate myself. And I have great respect for the court system, and we're going to deal with this in the court system.
Blagojevich's brother is also charged in the case. He's pleaded not guilty as well. The U.S. Senate race in Minnesota still isn't over 5 months after the election. On Monday, after a trial that lasted 7 weeks, a 3-judge panel ruled that Democrat Al Franken won by 312 votes. But today, a lawyer for Republican Norm Coleman said he'll appeal again, this time to the state Supreme Court. The first family's new dog was welcomed at the White House today. The Portuguese water dog named Bo toured the grounds before a bevy of photographers and reporters. Mr. Obama had promised his daughters a puppy during the campaign. Today, he said of the presidential pooch, he's got star quality. And still to come on the NewsHour tonight, the North Korea nuclear standoff, why some banks won't take government money, solar power and the economy, and Pakistan's new restrictive laws. Today, North Korea announced they are pulling out of nuclear talks intended to slow their weapons program. That came a day after the United Nations issued a statement criticizing a recent test missile launch. For more, we go to Balbina Wang, who was a State Department advisor on the Korean nuclear negotiations until January. She now teaches at the National Defense University. And Selig Harrison, the director of the Asia program at the Center for International Policy. He's visited North Korea 11 times, most recently in January. Welcome to you both. As in stepping away, Balbina Wang, I'll start with you. Is stepping away from these negotiations a really hostile act?
Well, it's not hostile, but it's certainly not helpful, and it does raise serious questions about how we will proceed to get to what the international community has said we wanted to do, which is to denuclearize North Korea. And in fact, what North Korea had declared that it would do several years ago.
Was this a surprising step that they took today, Mr. Harrison?
Not at all. You know that on March 26th, they said very explicitly that if even one word of criticism of their missile launch came out of the United Nations, they would discontinue the 6-party negotiating process on nuclear weapons, which had started in 2005. Now, that doesn't rule out bilateral negotiations starting with the United States. So I think this is a very significant development, a regrettable development. I think really, in retrospect, we're going to look back on it as one of the first big foreign policy mistakes of the Obama administration, because we knew this was coming. The North Koreans made it very clear. And
were they looking for an excuse to walk away?
No, I don't think so. Well, you can say that the North Koreans feel very beleaguered now. After all, Kim Jong-il, the leader, did have a stroke in August. He's had diabetes in the past, so his life expectancy is a big question mark. They are nervous about they're fearful that the outside world will take advantage of the situation in North Korea to try to bring down the regime. After all, they went through the whole Bush period with regime change as the avowed aim for the first half of the Bush administration. And so I think that they're in a very beleaguered state of mind. They're hunkering down, as it were. Hardliners have gained in strength since Kim Jong-il's illness in the relative power balance between hardliners and the pragmatists.
I want to get to all of that, but I wanted to go back to Ms. Wong as something you said at the very beginning of your comments there, which is that this was a terrible foreign policy blunder for the Obama administration, and I assume he means by speaking to the UN or getting the UN involved in this way.
Well, no, I disagree. I actually don't think it's an indictment on U.S. policy at all, and I think that's the point, is that there are those that are trying to shift this to exactly, as Sig pointed out, a bilateral track. And I think that perhaps that is true, that North Korea would like to see that. But the reality is the last 8 years, and when President Obama came into office, he also agreed that this was a multilateral effort. And there was no attempt to change the process that was established under the Bush administration.
Should there have been?
It's multilateral.
Should there have been?
No, I don't think so, because the point is that North Korea's nuclear programs and also its missile programs are not just a problem for the United States. Arguably, it's the United States that is actually a strategic threat, but it's the countries of the region that face a far more direct threat from North Korea's missile programs and nuclear programs. It's absolutely multilateral.
To casual watchers of what's been happening on the Korean Peninsula, it's like we've been on this merry-go-round before. This time, as North Korea steps away, Mr. Harrison, does this mean it's all over, these talks?
What's over is what used to be the U.S. formula, which was if you're a good boy and you denuclearize, then we'll move on to normalize relations with you. The North Koreans made clear when I was there in January that now they've changed their whole strategy. They now say if you want denuclearization, first you have to normalize. Because the reason we want a nuclear deterrent is because we don't trust you. We think you want to bring down our regime using the pressure of the nuclear option. So first, make friends with us, show us you're not hostile, which they think we were in our UN resolution the other day. And then we'll talk about denuclearizing when we don't think we have anything to fear from you.
Was the UN supposed to just sit by and let them do this? Was ignoring this the best option?
Well, of course not. And in fact, one could argue that this was rather a tame response by the United Nations. First of all, it wasn't a UN Security Council resolution. It was one step short of that. And frankly, if you read the statement very carefully, it was a serious statement, but in no way was it threatening. In fact, the statement clearly says that the United Nations encourages a peaceful resolution, a cooperative resolution, and encourages North Korea to come back with other parties and to talk.
Today it was interesting. At the White House, the word was that this was a provocative threat. And at the State Department, the word is that this was unnecessary. We're talking about diplo speak here, but is that a significant difference?
Well, no, not necessarily. But remember, too, what Sig said earlier, he's absolutely right. North Korea did tell us in advance that they would react badly if the matter was brought to the UN. On the other hand, they did say that if the United Nations took action, they would consider it a declaration of war. So North Korea's strong statement in reaction is still shy or short of something far more provocative and threatening.
Why did Russia and China try to restrain us from taking this action at the UN? They knew it was going to lead to an end to the six-party process. More important, the UN Outer Space Treaty permitted North Korea to do what it did. Japan has conducted 25 satellite launches, which have demonstrated rocket capabilities equal to those that we have in our missiles. South Korea is going to have a rocket launch, a satellite launch in July. And one of the reasons the North Koreans wanted to have theirs was to get theirs in first. They also wanted to have it because they think they can sell stuff to the Iranians and the Syrians. They wanted a big show for the big Supreme People's Assembly that they had. I mean, this was not really provocative to anybody, and that's why Russia and China did their very best.
You disagree?
Well, Sig, the point is that South Korea and Japan do not have UN sanctions prohibiting testing of satellite or long-range missile capabilities. That's the difference. The point is that China and Russia opposed a much stronger UN sanction for a variety of different reasons, and it's not because they felt that North Korea would pull out of the six-party talks.
Is there a ripple effect, which is possible? Is Iran watching this very carefully and saying, oh, we don't have to do this? You know, there have been olive branches extended to Iran. Can they say we don't need to do this?
No, I think the two situations are extremely different. Iran is a much more difficult problem, really, because Iran thinks of itself as a potential great power. I've been there 3 times in the last year. They think it's their destiny to be a major power, and nuclear weapons are part of that. North Korea is a poor, struggling, pathetic country, a country to be pitied much more than to be feared, with tremendous economic problems. They've got to normalize relations with us. They've got to get things from the outside world, but they're afraid we're going to do them in first with a nuclear preemptive strike.
Well, I disagree. I mean, I think that North Korea does have grandiose visions as well. And frankly speaking, North Korea may relatively be certainly very poor and very weak compared to all of these great powers that surround them. On the other hand, I don't know any other country of North Korea's relative poorness that is able to hold at bay the world's, four major powers and South Korea.
Final thought, briefly, Kim Jong-il, we saw the pictures of him. He didn't look at all well. Does his health, or the potential for his not being that healthy, have an effect on what happens here?
Very much so, because I think that they think of the outside world as trying to move in and take advantage of the potential instability in North Korea, and indeed trying to promote a collapse of the regime. And that makes them hunker down more. But our objective has to be to get their nuclear weapons program capped at the 4 or 5 weapons they now had. We should have kept our eye on the ball, kept these negotiations in play, instead of playing this game we played at the UN, which was kind of a ceremonial game. And let's hope that now we can, through bilateral channels, get back into nuclear negotiations before too long.
Kim Jong-il, Ms. Wong.
The danger here is, of course, we don't know what's really going on in North Korea. The danger is that we approach negotiations with North Korea assuming that there will be instability. I think we have to be very, very careful. We shouldn't make assumptions about the questions that we certainly don't know about Kim Jong-il.
Balbino Wong and Selig Harrison, thank you both very much.
Thank you.
In his economic speech today, President Obama said troubled banks are a fundamental part of the financial crisis. Some banks have taken notable steps of their own in recent days. Jeffrey Brown has more.
For months, we've been reporting on the hundreds of billions of dollars the government has invested in financial institutions. Now a handful of banks want to give the money back earlier than expected. One of the giants, Goldman Sachs, just announced a plan to begin paying back $10 billion. That follows 4 smaller regional banks that have repaid the government within the last few weeks. We talked first with the CEO of one of those institutions. Joseph DiPaolo is president of Signature Bank in New York City, which just returned $120 million to the U.S. Treasury. Well, Mr. DiPaolo, first, why did you decide to repay the money?
Well, Jeffrey, thank you for having me on. We decided to pay back the funds because the capital purchase program, as originally outlined, was for healthy, well-capitalized institutions, and we received those funds in the fourth quarter of 2008. Then all of a sudden, it changed from a program to well-capitalized institutions to one where unhealthy banks were allowed to participate. So it went from a perception of good, a great partnership between government and business, to a stigma of being unhealthy. And the government also placed some restrictions on banks.
Can I stop you there before we get to the restrictions? Because wasn't the original idea that there were and still are very weak banks, and that the government wanted healthy institutions, perhaps like yours, to participate so that those wouldn't be even further stigmatized? Wasn't that the original idea?
Yes, the original idea was that these healthy banks like Signature Bank would participate. We could possibly help the unhealthy banks by taking them over with the additional capital that we received from the government. Yes, that's correct.
All right, now you said there were some restrictions put on you, that we've heard some about those. Tell us how do you believe that these all hurt your bank? What was the impact of participating?
Well, when the stimulus package was passed on the 17th of February, everyone thought that it just placed restrictions on executive management for compensation purposes, when in fact it would affect our best salespeople, our best relationship bankers. So that effect of us being unable to possibly keep our best bankers because of the compensation restrictions, coupled with the recruiting that we would want to do, and we would be unable to recruit because of the restrictions, that really hurt fundamentally what we would like to do with the bank in growing the institution. The last part was they changed the game, or I should say they changed the rules in the middle of the game, and by doing that, it created a lot of uncertainty as to what other restrictions and what other rules would they place on the healthy banks. And therefore, those 3 elements caused us to really pause and say it's probably best for us to return the funds.
Well, on the compensation, let me break in just on the compensation issue, because that one, of course, has been very hard for a lot of people, a lot of public outcry there. You're saying that it's hard to retain even salespeople on the salaries that you were limited to?
Yes, because we have a basic objective compensation model that pays a substantial portion of compensation for the best salespeople based on the business that they create and the business that they do for the institution. So most of the compensation is based on bonus and less on salary. And in order to keep your best people, you need to have those restrictions lifted. I think the restrictions were really for those institutions that lost money and were paying out substantial bonuses, when in fact in 2008 Signature Bank had a record year. We had record profits in 2008. We continue to expect to do well in 2009. So not all banks are created equal, but yet the restrictions were the same for all institutions.
Well, just to be clear, so you're not saying that you accept the notion that many financial institutions took bad risks and got themselves in deep trouble. You're saying that what, we've tarnished, or the public and Congress has tarnished everybody the same way?
Yes, I believe that everyone was tarnished, and in fact, by saying that we would give back the funds, it lets the public know, lets our clients, more importantly, know that we were able to do so. We raised $150 million in capital in September, private capital on our own in a common equity offering, and we had substantial capital levels to begin with. We were invited to participate in this program, but we realized that as time went on, we were tarnished with one fell swoop of all banks being unhealthy, and we felt that the way to show the world that we were a healthy institution was by applying to give it back, and we were approved and done so.
And let me ask you finally, briefly, one more thing. I know you must talk to others in your industry. Do others feel the same way? Do you expect to see others taking similar action?
Yes, I think when you hear Goldman Sachs wanting to give it back, and we haven't spoken to them, but I have talked to other CEOs throughout the country that have actually called me to ask how we were able to give it back, because they want to do so as well. And I asked them very similar questions that the government asked us. How high are their capital levels? Because you need to have high capital levels in order for the public to feel comfortable with you. So I think there are other banks out there that want to do so.
All right, Joseph DiPaolo, thank you very much.
Jeffrey, thank you very much.
And now more on Goldman Sachs' plans and the larger banking and bailout picture. That comes from Deborah Solomon, who's been covering the story for the Wall Street Journal. Well, Deborah, Signature, we just heard, that's a small bank. Goldman Sachs is a giant. Are the issues similar?
Yeah, the issues are similar. I mean, as the CEO mentioned, banks like Goldman want to get out of the restrictions that the government has imposed. But more than that, they want to show, I think, the markets and investors that they're strong. And the way that they think to do that is to say, we're one of the first banks to repay TARP money. And you and your colleagues reported this morning that Goldman Sachs CEO Lloyd Blankfein had told this to President Obama several weeks ago, right? Right. Yeah, in a meeting that the president had with bank CEOs to sort of talk about the bank bailout, Mr. Blankfein raised this and said banks that are healthy should be able to pay it back. And the government is in somewhat of a quandary because the previous plan, which was started under President Bush and Treasury Secretary Henry Paulson, called for these banks to keep the capital, partly as a way to prop up the financial sector by infusing healthy banks, those with enough capital, to have money, but also helping give cover to some of the weaker banks that weren't at death's door but needed a little bit of help. This way, everybody was sort of egalitarian. It was very equal. You couldn't tell who was weak or who was strong. Everybody was getting the money. But in February, when the stimulus bill passed, there was a provision in there that allowed the banks to get out of TARP, the Troubled Asset Relief Program. Essentially, they said, if you don't want to comply with these restrictions, fine, you can get out of TARP. That wasn't what Treasury had intended. And so now they basically have no choice but to allow healthy banks to get out of the TARP program. Also, excuse me, why is that? I mean, it sounds like a good thing on the one hand for banks to be able to repay the government, and yet there is concern about that. Flesh that out a bit more for us. Sure. Well, one of the problems is that if you start allowing banks to pay the money back, they may be fine right now. I mean, Goldman Sachs maybe, just had a very good quarter, but nobody really knows what's going to happen. The economy seems to be, not necessarily turning the corner. I know the president said there were some glimmers of hope, but most people have a pretty downbeat assessment of where we're headed. And so there are a couple of concerns. One is, what happens if things get worse? Now, the government is doing some stress tests, they call them, to see whether banks can weather a severe and prolonged economic downturn. The metrics that they're using, however, aren't that far from where we are. So there's some concern that even if banks pass that test, if things get markedly worse, they may need money and not be able to get it. And the other part of it is that if banks give back this money and they have capital to continue, to have high capital levels, they may still not have enough money that they feel comfortable making loans and providing financing that they might if they kept this government money. So in other words, Goldman can give this money back because it has enough money, it can raise money. That they did a $5 billion equity offering today. But without that government capital cushion there, they may not provide the financing, the flow of credit, the things that are going to enable people to get student loans, home loans, credit cards, mortgages, things that basically the government is trying to jumpstart with this program.
Yeah, the very thing that the whole program is intended to do.
Right.
Yeah. Now, are there other big firms out there that are suggesting they might also want to start paying back money?
Well, I think some of them can't. I mean, banks like Citigroup and Bank of America, which have had to get, multiple infusions from the government for various reasons, probably are going to be among the last. But yes, I think all of these banks want to get out of this. Many of them didn't want to take the money in the first place and did so only because Treasury Secretary Paulson gave them, basically a mandate and said, you have to take this money for the good of the financial system. They've been, dying to get out of it, and the restrictions that are now on executive pay are making them even more eager. But I think, you may see banks like JP Morgan start to pay it back. Others, like John Mack, the CEO of Morgan Stanley, has said he thinks the bank should hold on to this a little bit longer. That may be because they don't feel like they are in a position to give it back right now. I think you're going to start seeing some banks trying to give it back, but again, this has to be done in consultation with their regulator. And so while it's the law that the banks should be able to pay it back, the regulator does have some discretion in terms of determining whether they should be approved to return the money.
So as we enter this, sounds like a new phase in all of this, is it possible that we're at the point where we see a real shakeout now, where we know who are the healthy banks and who's not?
Yeah.
It's been a little mushy up to now, I think, in many cases. But you're suggesting now we're going to really see who stands where.
Right. Well, I think one of the things, the Obama administration seems to not want to paint all of the banks with the same brush. And I think it's partly because they're forced to, but also because they want to give the markets confidence. I think investors are really worried about every institution because they just don't know where the exposure is. I mean, the things that investors are concerned about, and the reason they don't want to put money into financial institutions is because of the economic picture, but also the exposure to the housing crisis. And so I think the government feels like if you can sort of say who's strong, who's weak, it might give the markets more confidence to know where their money's going. The government's going to be there to provide money to the weak banks. I mean, they've basically said they're not going to allow any bank to fail. They're going to provide as much money as these banks need to feel comfortable lending. But I think there's a sense that, the markets really need more information so that they can make educated decisions about who to invest in and not just stay out of the sector, completely because they just feel like there's no bottom.
And as the administration and Treasury debate this, what steps to take going forward, how much is this compensation issue still on their minds, the one that provoked all the public outcry?
Oh, it's very much on their minds. And in fact, the president had come out with his own compensation restrictions before the stimulus bill was passed. And what he had tried to do was talk about capping salary, which is very different from what Congress did. Congress capped bonuses, and Wall Street's entire compensation structure, as Mr. DiPaolo said, is basically based on bonuses. Whether that's right or wrong, that's how it works right now. So it's very hard for banks, they say, to keep talented managers and people that they need to make their institutions stronger. And what the law did, as the CEO mentioned before, was that it went further down the pay structure. It's not just the senior executives, but it's the top earners. So it's the people bringing in the business, doing the work that the banks feel like they need to be done in order to get stronger and healthier. So it's very much on the mind of the administration. It's something they're wrestling with. They're supposed to issue rules in the near future that will sort of lay out exactly how these compensation rules will work. But the other thing they're worried about is also this idea idea of game changing, of getting these companies to participate, and then down the road having somebody, pull the rug out from under them and say you're now subject to, to X or Y. So they're very cognizant of that. I think they're going to try and do something that will help give some confidence to banks that participate that the rules won't be changed down the road as much as they can.
All right. Well, Deborah Solomon of the Wall Street Journal, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, a look at solar energy. Are its prospects burning bright or fading with a recession? NewsHour correspondent Spencer Michaels has the story.
From the hills of Berkeley, California, the solar revolution looks as though it's in full swing.
How you looking? I'm good.
Two teams of installers for a young firm called Sungevity work every day, mounting photovoltaic solar panels on roofs, so the homeowners can provide most or all of their own electricity.
Overproduction is just...
Danny Kennedy, a longtime environmental activist, now is a businessman running the firm in a time of economic turmoil.
It's going great, really, in the big picture, long-term sense. The only way is up because we need it, and this year might see a bit of a slowdown in the growth.
Kennedy says costs of rooftop solar are coming down, partly because of strong competition. After federal tax credits and state rebates, installations average about $12,300, depending on the size.
On most systems we're installing, we're seeing a 3 to 7 year payback period.
Nationwide, some figures seem to reflect Kennedy's optimism. Photovoltaic installations were up 75% last year, and a recent industry report says solar, along with wind and biofuels, had another banner year, even in the face of a brooding economic storm. But that storm has dropped stock prices of green companies 60 to 70% last year, and the credit crunch made it hard for companies to finance new technologies. Take Opta Solar, a Bay Area firm that had contracts to produce large amounts of electricity by using thin-film photovoltaic solar panels. According to spokesman Alan Bernheimer, the company failed to get the money to build its systems.
Most of our growth has been financed by private equity investors, and that is a group that has simply not been responsive since the worldwide economic crisis.
So the company stopped much of its work, laid off almost all its workers, and sold most of its assets to a larger company. Evidence, say analysts, of a consolidation in the solar industry. The weeding out of weaker firms may be a good thing, according to Silicon Valley venture capitalist Vinod Khosla, who has multiple investments in green energy.
Irrational exuberance is dying quickly. People are becoming much more critical. So I would say to you, a year ago, any solar photovoltaic company could get funding. I was afraid we might have a huge bubble of irrational valuations like we had in .com. I don't think we'll see that now. I do believe the really good companies are still getting funded, and that many companies will do better because of the current economy, because they'll be more cautious. Hi.
How you doing?
Come on in.
Good to see you.
A year ago, Khosla was working with Robert Fishman, the CEO of a solar firm called Osra. The company had big plans to make steam and power for California's largest utility. With a large solar thermal plant already in operation in Australia and a pilot facility in California, Fishman was confident he had the money to proceed.
I would say there's more people who want to give us money than we need. Everybody, I think, knows that this is going to be the hottest part of the power market for the next 10 years.
Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger agreed when he went to dedicate Osra's new facility.
This is not only green for our environment, this is green also for our economy, because it's a job creator.
But the economy changed and the money didn't materialize. Khosla, who is still working with Osra, put a positive spin on negative developments.
They've changed their project plan temporarily. Means they're not trying to go start building a $600 million power plant because the financing for it is not available. But they are adding lots of $15, $20 million projects that don't need project financing.
Still, says Khosla, he continues to invest in green energy because its future is very large.
We ourselves are being quite aggressive because, in fact, valuations have come down. We get a better deal.
At another firm, BrightSource Energy, investment money has not been a problem. BrightSource has a new contract to sell Southern California Edison enough solar energy from the Mojave Desert to power 845,000 homes, the largest solar contract of its kind. John Woolard is CEO.
We take hundreds of thousands of mirrors. We have them out in the desert. They reflect light up onto a boiler, and the boiler generates steam and turns a turbine, and that turbine produces electricity.
To finance such an expensive project, Woolard says his firm is working at a smart, stately pace.
We fortunately raised a significant amount of money last year, and we're very conservative as an organization, so we've spent very little of it. So we have no debt and quite a bit of capital in the bank, which is, in a time like this, a nice place to be.
The president's stimulus package may help. It includes a 30% cash rebate for individuals or companies installing solar energy systems. And it provides loan guarantees that will bring down interest rates for companies like BrightSource who are building new solar installations.
I think that was well thought through. It drives tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of jobs, and helps plants actually put steel in the ground this year and next year to start delivering.
Meanwhile, utilities continue to sign contracts with solar companies and plan to build some of their own solar facilities. Currently, solar energy supplies less than 1% of America's electricity, a figure the industry hopes to raise eightfold by 2025.
Finally tonight, the decision of the Pakistan government made final yesterday to allow Sharia Islamic law to be imposed in the Swat Valley. The government agreed several weeks ago to hand over control to local clerics and the Taliban. Correspondent Nick Payton-Walsh of Independent Television News explained what happened since.
There's a new law in part of Pakistan. It's the Taliban's, and it's close to medieval. This man is accused of having gay sex, but there's no tolerance for him here. Just a long, public flogging. They're happy for us to film and show their kind of justice. Now he's received his punishment in this world, says the militant. Don't talk to him about it. Mobile phone footage shows a woman this time accused of adultery. She can't shield herself. Held down outside her home. Her screams act as a warning to her neighbors. There's a new way of life here in Pakistan's Swat Valley. But there is a system behind this rough justice. Religious elders arrive for the very first session of a new Islamic court. There are prayers before judgment in this system. That means the rules of the Quran, not the state, take precedence. It's a break from the corruption of the past, a spokesman insisted to reporters.
Over the past couple of days, a case of a loan dispute was brought to the court. Both sides were summoned and a verdict delivered on the same day. The Taliban wants this system to be successful, and when it is, there will be no need for people to carry arms.
This was a police station, but now the Taliban sleep here. Their attacks forcing the police out and Pakistan's government into a peace deal under which the Taliban were allowed to have Islamic law here. Months ago, this picturesque valley was torn up by panic. An estimated 200,000 fleeing the army's advance against the militants. Scenes of dislocation just 3 hours' drive from the capital Islamabad that shook Pakistan. For months, the army tried to break the Taliban through force. They failed, and one leader, Mullah Fazullah, was able to preach the Taliban's new code of conduct over local pirate radio. The voice of Mullah FM got his way. The battle for Swat began to symbolize Pakistan's struggle to remain a modern society. The Taliban here were levelling schools, the education of girls in particular, an anathema to their values. Children's futures caught in the crossfire, the army also using schools as bases. Now these boys pick through the rubble of where they once learned. Amir, aged 8, says his poor friends now collect garbage during school hours and only the rich are able to learn in private schools. But the headmaster of one private school hopes peace and even Islamic law could bring some normality back to life here.
We went through a very harsh experience in the last 2 years. There was no law at all. There was anarchy. According to Sharia law, we have to establish a role model society in Swat. All the unemployed people should be given employment. All the uneducated people should be given education. All the deprived people should be given their basic rights. Then you can punish them according to Islamic law. You can cut a hand of the thief when he steals something.
But this vision of an Islamic utopia begins to falter even in the local barber. He says half his clients used to come here for a shave, but now a sign on the door reminds people that un-Islamic acts like shaving are forbidden. The new order here pervading society so fast, sometimes it's petty, others it's brutal. Above all, it leaves the growing fear that the Taliban's moment of power here is just beginning.
Judy Woodruff takes the story from there.
For more on the situation in Pakistan, we turn to Robert Grenier, former CIA station chief in Islamabad. He's now with Kroll Associates, a consulting firm. And Anita Weiss, she's professor and head of international studies at the University of Oregon. She has written extensively about Pakistan and was there in November. Thank you both for being with us. To you, Robert Grenier, first, why did the government of Pakistan agree to let the Swat Valley be ruled by Sharia Islamic law?
This really doesn't have so much to do with Sharia law per se. This really has to do with power. And the government found that it was simply unable, using the army, to subdue the Taliban in Swat Valley, and essentially they're capitulating right now. They're hoping that essentially these people can be appeased.
Anita Weiss, is that what's going on? They're hoping for capitulation?
Oh, I certainly concur with that, because there have been some very brutal things going on in the Swat Valley for the last 2 years. A year ago, there was beheading of police officers. But the problem there is that there's limited consensus on what Sharia law should actually be, what law would, what parts of Sharia should actually be imposed. Like, for example, in your lead-in, you were talking about education. Well, Islam certainly very strongly supports not only male education, but female education. There is a hadith of the Prophet Muhammad that says, seek knowledge, even if you have to go to China. So the idea of closing boys' and girls' schools is anathema, really, to Islam, but not to their particular interpretation.
Well, I want to get to that definition of what Sharia law means in just a minute, but Anita Weiss, just to follow up, is there likely to be capitulation, moderation as a result of this?
Well, I mean, it's clearly the government capitulating. Prime Minister Yusuf Raza Gilani was said to be in the opposition, trying to push President Zardari to signing the legislation. The former information minister, Sherry Rahman, has come out very vociferously, basically saying, you can't do this. I mean, where is the writ of the state here? And I think that this is very important, but I feel that the state felt that they could not control the situation in Swat. The violence, the terrorism was getting so out of hand, they had to capitulate on this.
Robert Grenier, does this then necessarily mean that the Taliban is stronger?
Oh, yes, absolutely. They've demonstrated that they have been able to seize control through force of arms in this area, and this isn't just a general concern. We're already seeing the aftermath in days after the acceptance of this agreement. The militants have already moved into the next valley over in Buner, and they're spreading their control to that area as well.
Well, let's get to the question that Anita Weiss raised about what does Islamic law mean? What is going to change for the lives of the people who live in the Swat Valley as a result of this?
Well, for the people in the Swat Valley and surrounding areas, this means that their area is essentially becoming indistinguishable from what Afghanistan was under the Taliban before 9/11. It's a very, very extreme vision of conservative Islam. So there will be no education for girls, there will be medieval punishments meted out, and there will be no recourse, there will be no way of appealing decisions. Essentially, people with guns will be there to carry out justice as they see fit.
And Anita Weiss, how do you see it? You were saying a minute ago, however, there's not a consensus on this.
Right, and I'm not completely convinced that by passage of the Nizam-e-Adil that it necessarily means that the Taliban are so much stronger, but rather that the state is indeed weaker, that the state realized it couldn't do much here. I am reluctant to agree strongly with the last comment, though, that it will come to resemble what Afghanistan looked like under Mullah Omar and the rule of the Taliban, in part because it is Pakistan. It's the Swat Valley. People have long been very pious, very religious. It's a Pashtun area. But on the other hand, not everybody firmly supports this. And we're not looking at a space that is war-torn and ravaged like Afghanistan had been prior to the Taliban. But rather, I think that there was a great deal of support for the idea of the enforcement of Sharia law, not necessarily the rest of the Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan's agenda, meaning the agenda of this coalition of Taliban groups that had come together in this area. And it may well turn out that it will have the inverse effect of getting public support away from the Taliban.
Let me interrupt. Are you saying because what they're proposing is more extreme than what the public's prepared to go along with?
Yes, and I think that it's more than just the enforcement of Sharia law. By saying that Sharia law is penultimate is one thing, but Sharia law is not what closes schools. Sharia law is not what causes a lot of the other things that have been mentioned already.
Robert Grenier, could that happen? Could it be that the worst might not happen because not enough people are prepared to go along with the most extreme interpretation?
Well, I think that the whole point is that most of the people in the Swat Valley, while many will support some version of Sharia law, clearly we're not supportive of the full agenda, if you will, of the Taliban there. The Taliban would not have been able to destroy dozens of girls' schools if the local people hadn't wanted to educate their girls. So the issue, I think, as was just pointed out, really has to do with whose writ is going to hold sway in that area. If the government were to move in support of local views and impose and administer Sharia law, that would be one thing. But again, I think that the fact that you don't have a majority of the people there who are supportive of Sharia law as it is being implemented by the local Taliban is precisely the point. These are people who have intimidated the local population, and they are enforcing their writ through arms.
So you don't see an option of a more moderate interpretation of Sharia law?
No. And the mere fact that they don't have public support for what they're doing will not matter to them one whit.
And Anita Weiss, you see that differently.
Well, I agree with what Robert just said. The big difference is that I think that by opening up this more extremist interpretation of other things beyond Sharia is a place where the state of Pakistan may well be able to hopefully gain some entry here. This is not, you have to remember that Swat is still even not the federally administered tribal areas or FATA. It's not Waziristan. It's a place that has been much more incorporated into mainstream Pakistan. It actually joined the country. The Declaration of Accession, I think, was only 1969. It actually joined the country, but is really seminal to it. I do think that we're going to see a stronger reaction amongst democratic and liberal forces in Pakistan. Already Sherry Rahman is speaking out about what does this mean for women's rights in this country, which is a states party to the United Nations CEDAW Convention.
Let me bring it, because we're getting into some areas and we've got just a short amount of time left. Robert Grenier, bottom line for the United States right now, wait and watch?
Well, at the end of the day, we cannot do for Pakistanis what Pakistanis must do for themselves. We can support the government in trying to resist the encroachment of militants, but we really can't do anything that they themselves will not spearhead. So the real concern that I have here, and when you get down to a bottom line about concerning U.S. national interest, the problem for us is that these areas are now in control of people who see themselves as part of an international movement which is led by al-Qaeda. And when al-Qaeda comes there to seek safe haven, these people will not say no.
However these particular laws are interpreted.
Exactly.
All right, Robert Grenier and Anita Weiss. We're going to leave it there. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Again, the major developments of the day. Retail sales fell in March, dampening hopes for economic recovery. President Obama talked of glimmers of hope for the economy, but he also warned there's still more pain to come. And maritime officials reported Somali pirates have seized 4 more ships since U.S. forces freed an American ship captain on Sunday. And an editor's note. Last night, we showed the wrong image provided by one of our video suppliers of the USS Bainbridge in our story about the Somali pirates. This is the correct photo of that ship. U.S. Navy SEALs on board the Bainbridge killed the pirates, allowing the rescue of American Captain Richard Phillips. And a reminder, you can find us online at our one-stop address, newshour.pbs.org. Tonight, you can hear or read more of President Obama's economic speech. Visit our Pakistan page for more on the violence along the Afghan border, including lesson plans for teachers. Plus, get an update on the Minnesota Senate race, courtesy of Minnesota Public Radio. Remember, the NewsHour is available whenever you want it at newshour.pbs.org. We'll see you online and again here tomorrow evening. I'm Gwen Eiffel. Thank you and good night.
Major funding for the NewsHour with Jim Lehrer is provided by Chevron, Intel, supporting math and science education for tomorrow's innovators.
One from the